We are live.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Beef and Bitcoin podcast. This is episode 17 with your host, Brett and CH. Today's topics, the continuation of the Bitfinex Tether story. Looks like they are doing an IEO, an initial exchange offering. We'll see how that goes. We have some Q&A to go over today. A couple listeners submitted a few questions. We're going to go over those. And then last but not least, looks like Chinese banks are starting to limit the USD withdrawals that their citizens can make. They're dropping that from $5,000 for a single transaction to $3,000 to a single transaction, and also requires proof of why you need to withdraw the money. What do you even need it for? Sounds shitty to me, but what else is new? But yeah, man. So how you doing this week?
I'm doing good. It's pretty interesting what's going on. We are recording, and futures markets have opened up, and equity indices are down 2%, and a bunch of foreign exchange currency pairs have jumped which way and whatnot. Like when we're talking like USD JPY, USD CNH, just a bunch of different pairs are jumping around. So definitely interesting time right now. A lot of stuff going on, like no trade in China, or no trade deal with China. It seems like after Trump's tweet today, it could make an interesting week in the markets, just everywhere. We're talking oil, we're talking even crypto too. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm curious to see if anybody tries to make a comparison between Bitcoin and crypto markets being correlated with the equity. So this is an interesting week to see how that plays out. If we see some more activity in equities and global markets, I'm definitely going to keep my eyes peeled to see how Bitcoin performs over the same time period. So more to come on that. But we should probably jump right in and talk about this Bitfinex initial exchange offering. So it looks like ICOs are dead and initial exchange offerings are back on the table. So as we talked about last week, if you listen to episode 16, Bitfinex had $850 million worth of funds frozen by the authorities in Poland, the US, and Portugal, and that was from their payment processor. So when you have $850 million seized and you have expenses, you're going to need to raise some funds. And now that we're in a Bitcoin world, the fastest thing you can do is launch a token. And I'm not even hating against Bitfinex. I mean, what else are you going to do? You got to try to stay solvent and remain running. They're holding a shitload of Bitcoin and a shitload of Tether of people's funds. So that should be a good warning of just be very careful leaving your shit on the exchange. Not your keys, not your coins. You guys know the old saying. But so I don't know, man. It looks like the original allocation is going to be available to private investors, and then they're going to open it up to the public on May 10th, if there's any allocations that remain. And I wonder. Let's see. We have 5 more days. Today's the 5th, so I will be interested to see if that token actually pumps. I hope it doesn't go too crazy, because they're just really trying to do this to solve a liquidity crisis, right? They're just trying to stay solvent. But it also looks like these tokens the goal would be to buy back these tokens on a monthly basis at whatever the market rate is. And they're going to use at least 27% of their profit from the previous month to buy back. So that would be similar to your stock buybacks. And if they can't get back the money that was seized, they should be able to buy back all of the tokens within 4 years. Now that's based on historical profitability from 2017 and 2018. And just before we started recording, we were talking about is it a good idea to extrapolate 2017 and 2018 um, revenue or profitability, and push that out into the future to say that they'll be able to buy all these tokens back in the next 4 years, because you never know what trading volumes are going to look like or revenue. If you take a look at Coinbase, their revenue from transaction fees is like down 40%. So it could like between last year. So like Bitfinex could really be in a struggle there if they start losing a lot of users that are fearful of having their shit seized. I don't know. What do you think about all this?
Well, it's not even just that. Like if the markets just dry up, liquidity dries up. In the case of just market failure in general, we're not just talking like or market structure collapse. Basically, we're talking about if U.S. equities go down. Like there's a Loomdart on Twitter. If you guys are not in crypto Twitter, you don't know who he is. He's a pretty funny guy. But anyways, point being, he was like all of 2018. He's like, yo, why do all these crypto people want stocks to go down? That's not good for crypto. And I kind of agree with him in some sense, because there's in some ways, people are gonna be like, yo, I don't want to throw my money into crypto because look what's happening with everything else. They're gonna be like, oh, I want cash, I want gold, whatever. Because a lot of people still don't know what crypto is. So giving them, I mean, like we think, oh, crypto's such a broad known thing, and you talk to the average person, and they're like, what?
Yeah, I guess that's a good question. Is Bitcoin a risk on or risk off trade? And I think the answer is it depends on who you're talking to. To me, when I was first buying Bitcoin, it was a risk on trade. It was 2017. Equities were making strides to the upside. Things were great. Economy was pumping. Why not? It's a risk on trade. I'm willing to risk it. And now, for me personally, Bitcoin is definitely the best risk off trade, in my opinion, just because of the way I've view macro global markets and 2 years of study on Bitcoin, sound money, and Austrian economics. I feel much more comfortable with my um, Bitcoin investment. But to the average person, if the market's going to shit, like Bitcoin's going to be the last thing that they might want to speculate on, right? I mean, they're looking to cash, gold, or real estate, something else, anything but the the arguably the riskiest asset on the planet, right?
Yeah, I think it'd be tough to say the riskiest asset on the planet, but you have a valid point there about that. In terms of the risk off, risk on, there's I was talking to someone today about it, and they even, he said he listens to a podcast, show, whatever, and the guy was talking about buy gold, buy silver, buy Bitcoin, and the guy, the older gentleman I was talking to, he agreed with that, and it was pretty interesting to see someone who is probably in their 60s say that. So I think it is catching on in a way, and I think people do see Bitcoin as a, there are people who are starting to see it as a risk off asset compared to other things like, well, okay, well, property in this area is way too fucking expensive. I already own some gold. I already own maybe some silver. I already own some land. What else can I buy that might have, and also generate a possible return? And when we talk about that, some people will say, well, they might just put 1% of their net worth into it, and
No,
that
that's a
might
good point.
and that might take that 1% of the net worth might grow to be 10% of the net worth just because of how small it is. And I'm not saying that's here again. Nothing here is financial advice. I'm a degenerate gambler. So nothing here is financial advice, but that's just a point.
No, that's a really good point. This is one of the only times in history when you could allocate 1% of your net worth into an investment such as Bitcoin and have that turn into the majority of your net worth in a decade. And these kinds of like wealth transfer events happen every few generations, and I think we're just lucky enough to be watching one happen. I mean, if you were in equities in the late 90s and you were seeing all the dot coms start to come to fruition, you could have made a boatload. And this is kind of the same thing for the millennial generation, and the generations below us will have an opportunity to have outsized returns greater than what they would have originally expected. More than that, 7 to 10% growth a year will look like chump change compared to massive 100x plus growth that we've seen in the last few years.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. There's that factor that if it does, and I think it's one of those things where it's like, okay, if it really does become something where it is a use in global trade and people use it and it has an infrastructure, it's an infrastructure layer, and it really comes to fruition of what it's supposed to be, then yeah, it's going to be very expensive. Like, and as we've talked about before, the numbers will get ungodly expensive. Like,
right,
it'll be stupid.
right.
Like, oh, Bitcoin went up $10,000 today, and people are like, well, fuck, if I owned one Bitcoin, I'd make $10,000 today, or just it just doesn't. But here again, the only thing I am concerned about at the end of the day here is just the liquidity issue, what's driving everything. Like, we can't deny the fact that all of 2017 was just the market. Every market went crazy. Like, talking equities and then crypto itself, and that was all liquidity driven. Central banks around the globe, and then recently we had that bump, and it was the People's Bank of China pumped $1 trillion of liquidity in the market. Well, what do we see? We see stocks continue to rise on just BS headlines, and everyone knows the economy's a bunch of shit. Like, you can't argue that fact, and I always tell people, you can't argue the fact that the economy's bad when, like, 69% of Americans have less than $1,000 in their trading account. It's like, that's fucked. Or not trading account, Jesus, savings account. But you get my point. $1,000 not in their Jesus trading account, but $1,000 not in their savings account. That's insane. So what happens when they lose their job? What happens when they lose that income source? That's a big deal. Like, they're gonna stop buying things shortly, and it creates this giant negative feedback loop that's gonna just eat itself out. People stop going to restaurants. The waitress at the restaurant stops making money. She stops spending money elsewhere, and it keeps cycling, and it gets worse.
Right. It's very downward spiral, and I think that's a really good point. And you don't know that that's happening until it's happening.
Yeah.
It's fun to speculate on now, and I guess I saw some of that in 2008 during the last or the Great Recession, whatever you want to call it. I was in college at the time, and gas was $5.50, and people were. It was not a great time. And that was also a long time ago. Things are way different now. The debt is higher than it was in 2008, both on like a state level, and then for personal loans, it's really gotten out of control. You have a ton of credit card debt, student loans, ridiculous auto loans. I mean, just a lot of shit. But I guess we can kind of touch on that when we get back to macro. But to bring it back to, the Bitfinex initial exchange offering,
just reeling it back in over here.
Yeah, we kind of went one way, and then
we went sideways. We went sideways a little bit.
But I think the point is, and I just thought of a way to tie it back, and I'm going to, is that now you have a way to raise money and get liquidity faster than ever humanly possible. So imagine Bitfinex was just an exchange that didn't trade crypto assets, for lack of a better term, and they had $850 million seized. How the fuck are you going to raise $850 million like a couple of weeks later to cover your expenses?
There's no other way to do it.
Like, it would be impossible, and that's my point.
I mean, this.
So that's a brand new innovation, right? So they're raising this, and that's very cool, and I'm glad that exists, because there shouldn't be all of these additional
regulations, hurdles, medians, middlemen everywhere. I mean, even just think about 2017. I know we always, not everyone sees eye to eye in the whole ICO thing, but still, that was crazy. Like, think about people were able to just fund things out of nowhere, anywhere. Like, think about, the basic attention token, which was like 30 million ICO, was done in like 30 seconds or something. It was filled up that quickly.
Right.
I mean, that's insane.
And it's cool. It's
really cool. That's like it's so far ahead of its time. Like, think about nowadays, like the hurdles that Uber is going through to get its fucking shares to the public so it can dump it on the fucking retail's head the last second. because Uber is supposed to come out this Friday. How the fuck are they gonna release if the market's down like 5-6% this week? They might just call it off. Yeah. Like, but then it might be too late. Like they're like, well, fuck. If it's like,
yeah. Do you know how much they've spent in the past, however long they've been planning this IPO? Like
insane
to push
amounts,
it back.
Insane amounts of money. It's probably ungodly.
So and that's a good point because even and using the IEO as an example, the barriers to entry to raising funding, it pretty much as close to zero as you can possibly get.
Yeah.
And that's really, really awesome that that is now possible. And you know what? If people are going to choose to invest in the IEO, there should be no investor protections by the state or whatever increased regulations. You need to be willing to get wrecked. And that's exactly how it should work. So I do appreciate the lawlessness of the whole space because it's just it's I feel like I'm seeing the first like free market, and it's cool to watch. And I hope that kind of continues. And the free market will wash away all the people that get wrecked, all the bad ideas, and it's going to work exactly as a market should. And that's fucking awesome.
It's just the future. That's what it is. It's like it'd be like, you know, understanding how big automobiles were in the 1880s and 1890s and understanding that. Like, and by, like, obviously people are, well, F this, but by, like, 1930, 1940, it's a whole, you know, different ballgame, and automobiles run everything. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's the same thing, except it probably would be a little more accelerated, I imagine. Like, technology adoption just gets more and more, increases. But still, when you think about the internet took a long fucking time, man. We're talking like to get where it is today. Internet really has been decades. We're talking late 60s when TCP/IP protocol, the basic foundations of the internet, was, you know, completed. Like it's you know, that's what we're talking 50 years, really.
Yep.
I mean, so that's where we're at in this, and like who knows where this will be in 2 decades.
Yeah, I don't think we can even.
I can't even speculate.
You can't even speculate or predict, and I don't think we've seen the iPhone moment of what Bitcoin can kind of do. I think it's great as people who use it as a store of value. I understand that use case. I can see people wanting to use micropayments for Lightning and see what use cases that enables. But I don't think we've seen that light bulb iPhone moment when it clicks for 1 billion users, right? It's like WhatsApp has 1 billion users. Like that makes sense to so many people across the globe that can now communicate end-to-end encrypted. We haven't seen that moment yet for Bitcoin, and I have no doubt that we will, but I also have no doubt that I can't even come close to speculating on what that might be. And whatever it's gonna be is gonna be a surprise. What do you think? Should we jump into some of these Q&A questions? All right. So thank you to all of the listeners who submitted questions on Instagram. It's great. We're gonna try to rip through a couple of these. So the first one is, what is the best exit strategy? That's a good question, and it's something I've actually been thinking about a lot. And it really depends on how you define exit strategy, because I have no plans on exiting from Bitcoin back to fiat. You know, my investment thesis is based on Bitcoin becoming money in the decades to come. But that doesn't mean that I won't have bills to pay, things to buy, purchases to make that unfortunately might still require fiat to pay for. So, you know, what is my exit strategy? To be quite honest with you, I don't have one yet, but it's something that I think about every single day. And I think the best thing that you can do is have a plan for taking profits at particular price targets that you have predetermined, and setting a plan that will not change no matter what. But I don't have a plan yet. I don't know. It's something I need to work on. I was actually thinking about building a should you sell calculator that goes and calculates like your cost basis if you sell. And this was the example that I was talking with one of my followers, and a really nice guy. We had a great conversation. And he was like, "Are you seriously not going to sell the next top?" And I was like, "Dude, I have no fucking clue." And I was like, let's say you sell two Bitcoin at a hypothetical price of 250,000 and assume your cost basis is zero. All right, so you net 500K, you're up 500,000. Well, then what? Well, you need to subtract any expenses for that sale. Those could include taxes, accounting, moving money from one place to the other things that you haven't really factored in yet. So you have that. So let's call it 15%. Then you're left with, I don't know, 425 grand. And then you have to say, okay, well, are you gonna buy back those two Bitcoin that you sold? If the answer is yes, okay, well, how much is that going to cost you? Well, you don't really know. You don't know how low it's going to go. Are you assuming that it's going to drop at least 80%? Are you assuming that it's going to drop at least 50%? Do you have enough funds to buy back those two? If it only drops down to 100K, will you not spend the extra 200K that you have left? It's a really tough question to answer. And I mean, I live in California. 200 grand isn't going to get me shit. Like that's not going to help me survive for that much longer. If you know what I mean. Like I don't even mean to be a dick about it. It's more like 200 grand is 20% on $1 million shack down the street from me. Like it's just yeah, and then I have like a $7,000 mortgage after that. So while it sounds great to have an extra 200K lying around, I don't know that I'm going to be able to use that to my benefit. And also, if Bitcoin's at a quarter mil, I would assume that the dollar is much weaker than it is today, and real estate prices will probably be lower than they are today. And I don't know that I'd want to be converting an appreciating asset into an asset that could potentially lose value because the prices have been, I don't know what the word I'm looking for here is, but distorted because of like a few decades of cheap credit. So you've seen asset deflation just from everyone's like, oh, there's not that much inflation. Well, yeah, it's hidden because all you need to do is look at fucking real estate prices in any metropolitan area to know that it's ridiculous, but you can still buy a cheeseburger for a couple bucks. So I understand the inflation doesn't seem as bad on the surface argument, but when the average person can't afford to buy a house and have children and have leisure time because they can afford all those things, then there's inflation. It's just hidden in places that are unseen. Yeah, they're invisible to the untrained eye.
We had another question, and the question was, should I keep holding Neo? Well, that's a kind of a you specific question, and it really honestly depends on where you bought. But I know what CH is already going to suggest, and I would probably suggest the same thing. This is not financial advice at all. This is zero financial advice. I'm just going to look at this chart and tell you that buddy's done for now. That does not look pretty. Even if you bought really early, it probably isn't pretty in the dollar sign. This is just the Bitcoin chart. It's probably really bad in the dollars because Bitcoin fell 80% too, so you got to keep that in mind. So, obviously Bitcoin's up now, and that's what makes it even look worse. I don't even want to know. Let's look at the volume. The volume would be a really key teller here. Yeah. I'm just going to let the volume tell that story there. No, you should not keep holding Neo. This thing is fucking dead, it looks like, for a time being. Like, the volume, there's not even volume. Okay, there's a little volume. I don't know.
Yeah, it's dead.
It's dead. It looks pretty dead. I don't know.
Yeah.
It looks pretty dead. It might come back to life. There's coins that trade forever on fucking Cryptopia. There's coins on some of those shitcoin slingers, dude. There's coins that just trade forever, man, and they're dead. There's no development team. I remember when I was exploring Cryptopia and looking at coins, I was like, you just try to find a gem or something, and you're like, oh, this coin's been dead for 4 years. You look at their Twitter, and it's still getting traded. So it doesn't mean it won't go up, because speculation still happens. As long as the token's there, people will speculate. It's that's just dude, fucking BitConnect, dude. BitConnect kept going after it fucking fell apart completely.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, these coins will be traded forever. That's a really good point. And Doge was just put on Coinbase, and people were celebrating. And I don't know that anyone's done anything.
Hey, Doge is sponsored. fucking NASCAR. I consider that as about the most legit crypto there is out there, and it funded wells in Africa. You can't argue the fact that the Doge community has done some things.
Yeah, I don't argue with that. I do want to make note that the founder of Dogecoin literally has said he's like, I made it as a meme, pretty much.
Yeah.
Which is great because we like memes. Memes are kind of how we got here.
Memes are you.
And yeah, like that's. But the short answer is when you think about what's being built here, we're trying to build global money. Neo just doesn't have a chance in hell, and neither do 99.9% of any of these shit coins. But they can be very fun to speculate on, and just you need to prepare accordingly. My experience with shit coins was not great, and like I did okay. It's not that but you kind of have to everybody has their hodler's journey, right? They go and they find out about Bitcoin, like, oh yeah, it's kind of old, blah, blah, blah. And you go through the shitcoin thing and you think, oh, these are the next Bitcoin and it can do X, Y, and Z more than Bitcoin, whatever, pick a metric. Yeah. And you kind of work your way back and then you realize, oh, okay, let me read a little bit about money, history, and the Bitcoin standard and blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, you're a libertarian Austrian economist and
meat eating.
And you eat meat. Yeah, right. So I mean that's pretty much the cycle of how it goes, and you'll be able to answer that if you keep listening to this podcast. You'll answer that question.
It's
yourself for sure.
No, it's definitely interesting. The holder's journey. It's interesting to say the least. Shitcoins are definitely as you said. It's not that. It's just you did okay. It's just It's definitely interesting to see where we're at now. It's definitely different for us because when in 2017 when we were getting in things were think about the how much people were talking about the Facebook groups, the Reddit groups, the Twitter,
right?
Everything was going crazy with crypto. If you looked hard, you didn't have to look that hard, but you could find it, and then obviously it all culminated in December. But the shitcoins made sense then to a lot of people, and obviously there were some people who knew, but there was you can start to tell things after a while, and certain shitcoins, obviously there's a lot that were just scams, but until you really understand, because Bitcoin was just, oh wow, Bitcoin's expensive, and also, as I said before, Bitcoin transactions were slow as shit. They were slow as shit, and you're like, well, this is fucking useless. I'm like, I could send money to this altcoin in 5 minutes. And I looked into Bitcoin a little bit, but obviously I read the white paper and everything, but I didn't understand, at that time, I didn't understand, I guess, the importance of money at that point.
Right.
Real importance. And I went to, that rabbit hole fucking ruined me, dude. That ruined me as a person, probably. That ruined me as a person. That money rabbit hole has just ruined me as a person. I'm not going to lie. I'm sorry. People know me. I'm sorry. It did. Dude, once you understand how fucked the money system is, you're just wow, everything else does not fucking matter.
Yeah. It can definitely give you a very pessimistic look on just kind of everything in general.
Yeah.
But it will teach you a valuable lesson about shit coins and sound money. So that's a good thing. So I guess we kind of talked about the next question just now. Thoughts on using altcoins to gain more Bitcoin. If you can do it, good luck to you. I wish you very well. My experience was okay. I ended up doing all right, but I did go back and calculate, had I never converted any Bitcoin to any shitcoins, or had all of my purchases, had I never bought any ETH and I would have bought Bitcoin instead, I'd have double the amount of Bitcoin that I have right now, which is a lot.
Yeah.
That's a shitload more, double the amount that you had now. And I wouldn't have had to do any kind of crazy accounting calculations for tax purposes. You wouldn't have to worry about short-term capital gains, long-term capital gains. All of that stuff would have went away. And, it's a lesson that everybody kind of needs to learn on their own. If you think you can be a good trader and you've studied the markets and you've looked at all the cycles and you think you can time it well enough that you'll end up with more Bitcoin than you have when you started, then I guess go for it. The outcome will teach you whether or not you were correct on that. But yeah, I don't recommend it, but I also didn't do very well, so that's my biased opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point. It really, as you said, like if you understand it and you really take your time to understand trading, the mental and emotional aspects, go for it. All more power to you. Doesn't mean you'll do well, but obviously, like there's a very good tweet that one guy, and it might turn out to be a shitty tweet, but he mentioned like someone's like, he's like, if you want to make money, just look at those medium-sized altcoins with rising volume profiles that are down 90% and buy them. You know, and there's that famous quote that, and I'm not going to say this is investment advice, but there's that famous quote that Warren Buffett says, be greedy when others are fearful, and be fearful when others are greedy. And he's 100% right about that. Like, there's people that just made a stupid amount of money in altcoins and Bitcoin because they bought when no one was talking about it and no one cared about it, and they sold when everyone was talking about it. It's that simple. So that's one way to look at it. Like there's people who bought Bitcoin when everyone said it was going to die at 3,200, 3,300, and they're sitting pretty well up, almost like 70% right now, 60%.
Yep.
Something like that. Yep. So they're sitting pretty right now in that sense. So it's just some food for thought on like buy when there's blood in the streets. I mean, it doesn't mean buy everything when it goes down, because some things don't come back, like Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers.
Right.
Some things don't come back. It's like stocks, that's something to worry about. Like, seriously, people don't realize there's so much risk in the stock market. And, like, when this thing inevitably bursts, there's going to be so many companies that just fold up, that just don't cease to exist. Like, Uber is just a giant source of losing money. Sure, it transports people, but unless it keeps getting funded, it's just going to run out of money. What it loses like $3.7 billion a year, $4 billion a year. You can't, like, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, when I think about maybe the tech bubble 2.0 popping, if that hasn't happened yet, but when it does, I guess is a better way to think of it. If we think back to what survived the last .com bubble, you had the handful of things that remained, and really the question you need to ask yourself is, will Uber be one of those companies? And I could probably make pretty good arguments for and against that. I mean, they're definitely doing better operationally than their competitors. I guess Lyft would be their main one. They're much more efficient. They scale much better. So to your point, if they can remain solvent by having capital continually injected into them year after year until they can start turning a profit, then I could see them coming out not relatively unfazed, but surviving the next crash. But yeah, I definitely can't say the same for like Bird scooters or half of the bike startups that started.
Yeah, you're completely right about that in that sense. It's definitely interesting to think about all that in a nutshell, where we are and how we've gotten here.
I don't know. All right, let's jump to another question.
Sorry.
Do you think
I got distracted for 1 second there?
Next question is, do you think the bear market is over?
That's a tough one. You want to lead off, or you want me to lead off? That's a good one, because it's
yeah, I can start. So, do I think the bear market is over? I think the bear market's over to an extent that if we won't make a lower low, I would be surprised if we broke below 3,000, but it wouldn't surprise me if we were to continue bouncing around from where we are today to 3,000. Sure, I think this is an accumulation phase, and I would reference Tur de Meester's latest article that we're going to try to cover in another episode, hopefully in a week or two. But this is your typical accumulation phase. It's been a year or 18 months into this bear market, into the downtrend. We've seen this pump from 32 to 58-ish in the last few weeks. That's a great sign, but it's also a good sign that we're now in that accumulation phase. Bitcoin transactions on chain are like at all-time highs right now. They're about to make new all-time highs, and the mempool's still low. It's still a couple cents to send a transaction. So things are definitely looking good, but this is the time for me. I'm stacking sats as always. Not a week goes by that I don't stack. I don't really care what the price is, and I try not to even look at it that much anymore. And I guess you could say I'm always in an accumulation phase, but I don't know. What do you think? Is the bear market over?
That's a good question. I was gonna say, just to clarify, he is only talking about Bitcoin. He's not talking about shitcoin. So if you're like that dude holding
Oh
Neo,
yes, good point.
yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because some people are like, oh, I'm gonna hold this shitcoin. Well, if you're like that dude holding Neo, that Neo might not come back to its price ever again in U.S. dollars or even Bitcoin. So just a food for thought. But that's a good question, dude. As I said like earlier, and we're not gonna hear the part because my mic went all haywire me. But I am very pessimistic about everything globally. Like we just saw China lower the bank liquidity, which we'll be talking about in a second. Lowers daily USD withdrawals, which is US dollar withdrawals. You got the trade war probably off now, or trade war, excuse me, is on because the trade deal is off. That's a huge deal. You got Hamas firing rockets in Israel, Israel bombing the Gaza Strip. That's kind of a big deal. I don't think people realize take that into account. And then you got what's going on in Paris, and Paris has been going on for like 6 months basically. It's a big deal. Like France is a big country. Like, that's like a lot of people who aren't working. That's a lot of people that aren't going there for tourism because there's protests and riots going on. Like there's a lot of things I'm factoring globally, and like yeah, I'm bullish on Bitcoin because I like the chart setup and I like it being a base layer and secure money. And I don't hold like a bias with Bitcoin, gold, silver, other things because I think it's stupid to do it that way. I think if you're fundamentally like, oh, you can only have Bitcoin, everything else is shit, that's stupid. Like there's reasons to own land, there's reason to own gold, there's reason to own silver, there's reason to own Bitcoin. There's reason to own dollars, U.S. dollars. Why? Because it's legal tender in the U.S. Everyone's gonna accept a dollar from you. Now, obviously, if you hand someone a fucking like ounce of gold, they're like, okay, yeah, I'll take that ounce of gold because it's worth a lot. Obviously, if you're paying the right amount, but you get the point. It's I'm bearish in the sense that to get back to the point of is the bear market over? I'm bearish on everything basically because central banks have pumped trillions of dollars of liquidity in the economy. Debt has risen to all-time highs. We're like at 245 trillion globally, and that's household and government. So like, not only is personal debt high, it's high everywhere. Student loan debt's a perfect example, and I always reiterate because it's stupid. It's 1.5 trillion. There's a whole generation of millennials and even some of the older Gen Xers that are just wrecked. They can't do anything. They can't buy a home. They can't start a family. They can't do shit because they're either high 5-figure or high 6-figure or just 6-figure in debt in general. And they're given these degrees that, they're thinking they're going out of college and make 100K a year, and you're making 50, you're making 45, and then you got to factor in all the expenses and everything else, and then before you know, you can barely pay those loans off, and you're stuck paying them off forever.
Yep. Yeah, I totally understand that point of view from a bearish perspective. When you really take a big step back and look at it, it's scary times. There's no other way around it.
And everything's fucking mispriced. Everything's mispriced. That's the issue.
Yeah, I think that's another really good point. The mispricing of a lot of assets, it doesn't matter what it is. It's been influenced in ways that it's really hard to imagine. So I hope to see proper pricing of all assets in the years to come, so that people can start to make smarter economic calculation with what they're going to do with their life. All right, last question. The question was about Thunderbird for Lightning Network, and pretty much it's another implementation of the Lightning Network specifically for IoT devices, and that rings a bell with me big time because I had fell in love with IOTA for a time because I was very into IoT and micro payments and machine-to-machine payments. That made a lot of sense to me, and now obviously, it doesn't, but it makes perfect sense for the Lightning Network and having IoT-powered devices, pretty much running on top of Bitcoin. And I have a little quote here from the CoinDesk article, and it says, IoT is one of the important Lightning Network application area, but no one knows what the killer app is. In such situation, an increasing number of developers and prototyping trials are very important. And we kind of talked about that killer app idea earlier in the show. And it wouldn't surprise me if we saw some very cool IoT applications that are enabled by the Lightning Network that may spark some excitement. So who knows? I'm interested to see that. I've seen a few ideas of, using Lightning to pay per API call. So maybe if you have a shitload of data and you don't want to charge a monthly fee to have access to it, you can charge per call. And if you're only going to hit this thing 1,000 times a month and you don't want to pay the full price of a subscription, you can just pay each time you call it. So I don't know if there's a ton of IoT powered devices out there that can have data that's worth paying for. That might be one of those iPhone type moments where we get a little bit of a killer app. But I think stay tuned, but it does excite me. What do you think about IoT?
I'm not as much in that tech space as you. Not that I understand technology, but that's a good question. As we talked about before, the killer app. What's the killer app for Bitcoin? Obviously, you can see the first one being a store of value, but really, as you said, the killer app, like email being built on top of, because I guess they say the killer app for internet communication, but email is that first thing, and is there something here that's going to come on top that's going to make it, drive, people towards it, users basically. Because again, that's the big hurdle here is users. And we always talk about price.
It needs to drive adoption.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that would be cool to see some sort of application like that does lead to more adoption. That would be very cool. But the good news is, I think you have, as maybe Lightning is like that first application layer where HTTP enabled a lot of people to build a lot of really fantastic tools on the internet. Lightning can be something that is going to bring all the developers that went over to Ethereum and all these other shit coins because they wanted to build cool things. They didn't have an opportunity to build anything cool on top of Bitcoin because the infrastructure just wasn't even there yet to build something worth using. And now you're seeing micropayments and gambling on Lightning. You're seeing paying for articles. You can read the first paragraph for free, and if you want to pay for the rest of it, you can pay a couple of satoshis, and then you have to worry about dealing with the ads that are leaving pixels on your screen and tracking you and selling your data and private information. The incentives now have changed because micropayments exist, so that enables new kinds of applications that weren't possible before. And now you just have to let developers come into this space and start building cool software and things that people want to use. And I don't know that they know what people are going to want to use until they build it and just put it out in the wild. So I think it's good news that more developers are coming into the space, and being able to build cool IoT shit will definitely be fun to see in the future.
Yeah, so what you're talking about. I just watched that video. I don't know if you saw that. It's pretty interesting to see that set up.
It's cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. So, what that looks like, I don't know. Could it be the Vinnie Lingham's idea where you have a fucking vending machine and it you type in whatever the code you want to get out your soda or your bottle of water or whatever thing, it gives a QR code and boom, you scan it. I don't know. That sounds pretty sweet. Paying for sensor data. The
meat filled
applications
machines.
Are endless.
That's the future.
Yeah, no, that is the future. I actually saw somebody. There's a startup that has a meat filled vending machine with really prime cuts of meat, and it sounds dumb right now, but if infrastructure and retail is changing, I don't see why that wouldn't work. But I don't know. If it does work and it's a franchise, I will 100% becoming a meat vendor. Slinging meats. Yeah.
Slinging meat.
Slinging meats. That would
slinging meats.
That would be a dream of mine if I could make memes, sell meat, be a rich Bitcoiner. Yeah, life would be good, man.
Life would be good. Slinging meats.
Life would be good.
Should we jump into the Chinese banks limit USD withdrawals?
Yeah. Go over what they're doing to people.
Yeah, so this happened. Was it just over the weekend or on Friday? I think it was on
Yeah, I think
Friday.
this was just recently. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, basically, they quietly lowered the daily limit on the foreign currency cash withdrawals. So lenders have reduced the scrutiny benchmark for U.S. dollar withdrawals to $3,000 versus or from $5,000 on the instructions of the central bank. Um, this is going to be a big deal. Like, especially thinking about people who are like U.S. citizens over there, or people who are using USD, over there. It might not seem like a lot, but still, it could be a big deal. And you wonder if other countries follow suit. Because what people don't realize, and like I try to tell people, the U.S. dollar is it's just basically an economic weapon. It is a giant economic dick, and the U.S. uses it everywhere. And if people don't realize it, that's why the sanctions are very useful, because the current monetary system, 95% of it is through SWIFT, which is U.S. dollar, and the U.S. can basically cock block you if you're trying to wire anything. I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying that's what happens. Like, I'm just putting it bluntly out there. That's like just to give people just a very layman term way of how that happens. And then again, U.S. dollar in terms of reserve currency. I don't know the exact percentage, but it's still over. I think 50%, right? Well over 50.
I would assume.
I would assume
so.
well over 50. I can't remember. But I think it's like 60 something. I can't remember the top of my head. But anyways, the point is we're starting to see this, again, people are moving away from the dollar, and it's happening, and people aren't really, like, in the U.S. don't pay attention to it. They don't think of it as it just doesn't make headlines. It's not as good as something stupid like the Jussie Smollett case or something stupid like that making all the tabloid headlines, and people slowly watch as their dollar is just going to, lose a lot of value if this, continues to happen. Like, if the dollar continues to lose demand abroad, $1 will start to make their flight back to the U.S., which will F up inflation, probably. I would imagine, because you're just going to have an increase in circulation. That will definitely have an effect. But on top of that, you're just less demand, less reserves. I think in the next decade, honestly, just due to a black swan financial crisis event, we're going to see a move to an asset-backed currency. I don't know if that'll be I guess Bitcoin's just a different internet money. But something like Bitcoin, will it be something like gold, silver? I don't know. Will it be something oil-backed? I have no clue. Land-backed? I don't know. But I think this whole fiat system is just way unsustainable, and we're about to see it happen unfold in front of us. Because what happens, we just kicked the can down the road 10 years ago. And I know I'm getting a lot off topic here. But my point is like the can was just kicked down the road. Nothing's changed. And this has allowed politicians to stay shitty the way they are in the U.S., and you can't argue that fact. The majority of politicians just suck. It's just, like, the stupidity things we deal with in the U.S. now, and just the encroachment on just basic privacy and freedom just shows the lack of, real care there is there. And I don't mean to say that there's not, obviously there's bad apples versus good apples, but that's my point there.
Yeah, I didn't at first. This didn't really hit me that hard, but when you think about a couple of things, so one, for transactions of $3,000 or more, or if you're withdrawing 3,000 US dollars and you live in China, they want to know exactly what you need that cash for, specifically. That kind of sucks. Because it really infringes on your privacy. And somebody could turn around and make the argument, well, if you're not doing anything bad or illegal, why can't you just tell them? And, I hate that argument because it's a shitty one, and you don't owe anybody an explanation for anything that you're going to do, first of all. And your privacy is your privacy, and you should not be forced to kind of give that up for the greater good, or however you want to say that. What I will say is that Bitcoin has never gotten in my way when I was trying to withdraw it or send it anywhere or do anything with it. And I think that's a good way to kind of really show the difference between Bitcoin and fiat money, that you really do need someone else's permission every single time you use it. Period.
Yeah. I'm going to correct myself here, because I think this is only for Chinese citizens, so a U.S. citizen could just, pull however many USD he wants out. Obviously, because China probably wouldn't care if a U.S. citizen was just spending a lot of money in the country. Because what I'm reading here, according to the quota set by the regulator, Chinese citizens are allowed to exchange and withdraw up to $50,000 in U.S. dollars per year in foreign currency, either in a lump sum or in installments. So like that could be euros, that could be yen. But anything but the yuan is that you can only do it to 50,000 in terms of US dollars.
Gotcha. Yeah, it turns out the woman who like freaked out about not being able to withdraw $200, it says that she was put on a watch list of customers who are making frequent withdrawals. That really sucks, dude. Say you hit the ATM once a week for a couple $100 for whatever you're going to spend it on. It does not matter what it is, and being questioned like, hey, what are you doing with that a couple $100 you keep withdrawing? You're on the frequent withdrawals list. Why aren't you using your credit card for every single transaction so we can make sure you're not doing anything that we can tax you for? It's ridiculous. It sucks. And that's a really good example that you always talk about is why you do like having cash. It sucks. It's kind of scary. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw it here eventually. I don't want to even think about that. Well, I'll be using Bitcoin, so it will be different for me. But yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, it's, as you said, it just sucks. And China's become a giant police state, and we're not too far behind. And that's what scares me, is people in America don't care about that, and that sense of lack of privacy, militarization of the police, and then just freedoms being stripped left and right. It's happening everywhere globally. You're seeing in England where people are just literally getting in trouble for posting things on like Facebook and Instagram or Twitter. It's getting absolutely ridiculous, and people just don't care. It's like the frog in the boiling pot of water. It's just happening all around them, and they don't fucking care until it's too late. And that's the issue. That's why I started posting so much shit on Instagram, because I was just sick and tired of sitting on the fucking sideline watching people be stupid and care about things that don't fucking matter. And I know I say it harshly, but it is true. I mean, a majority of people my age are probably caring about fucking Game of Thrones tonight. And I hate to rip into it. I don't watch it at all, whatever. But my point is, there's a lot more important things out there right now that are happening just on a global macro scale, and also just on a national scale too. And yeah, that's my rant.
No, yeah, I think that's a good point. It's times are tough. Shit's going crazy all over the place. But it's a lot to talk about. It's a lot to learn from. It's a lot to take in also. But yeah, man, I'm kind of pumped for next week. Monday is going to be a big day. We'll see what happens with all markets, not just Bitcoin, with those US equities, and we'll see how they open and close, and hopefully there's a ton more shit to talk about when we record next week.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Goddamn, my bad. Sorry about that. I was trying to close out a Hamas video shooting rockets. Yeah, as I said earlier, that's a big deal. I don't think people are factoring those things in. And that's what I mean again. People are watching Game of Thrones, but they don't care what's going on globally. That's going to really probably affect them. And it might not happen now, it might not happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen. And I think this week's going to be a very big week. There's, as you said, we're probably going to have a lot to talk about later this week. I don't see any way not. As I said earlier in the show, the NASDAQ, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and the S&P 500 were all down over 2%. On futures, so that's not a good thing. It's gonna make tomorrow interesting to say the least for a Monday. And I don't know where it ends. We've basically the whole stock market's risen on bullshit fundamentals. I'm gonna talk about this for 2 minutes, and then we can cut this podcast off. I don't really care. I just want to basically point out to people that everything has been built up on fucking share buybacks and cheap fucking debt, and there's consequences for that, and that's what's about to happen. You can't buy back shares forever. I was talking with my buddy about this the other day. What, are they gonna buy back the amount of shares? Is Apple gonna keep buying back $75 billion worth of shares for the next decade? They're not gonna fucking exist. There's gonna be no shares to float around. I mean, it's stupid. The biggest source of demand for the past decade was corporations buying back their own shares. It's stupid. It skews the whole market. And guess what? When corporations are buying back their shares, guess who's dumping their shares off? Executives are, because they know they can then, because they know there's liquidity. It is just a effed up thing, and I guarantee share buybacks will be a debate of 2020 election in America, but it's not the only problem, but it is a big problem.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. We're gonna find out. I'm pumped for the next episode. We gotta get to the next one.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get to the next one.
All right. Well, that was episode 17 of the Beef and Bitcoin podcast. We also, I forgot to tell you, we have over 1,000 listens according to Anchor, which is the hosting service that we use for this podcast. That is super cool. Appreciate all of the reviews from everybody, the comments, the engagement. It does make a difference. We do appreciate it. So we thank you for tuning in, and we will make sure to like and subscribe to this if you don't already. Tell your friends, send it to your grandma, whatever you want. But, stay tuned.
Yeah, thank you. As I said, CH just said, please, we really appreciate reviews, and people actually when people DM me about this stuff, I actually do enjoy talking about it, or people talking about it. I do enjoy talking about it. There's a reason, as he said, we started this podcast because we like talking about this stuff. Otherwise I wouldn't do it. I enjoy this. It's relaxing. I don't know if it's relaxing, what it is, because I just talk about shit I enjoy. But I really do appreciate when people actually do give comments or leave us a review or rating, whatever. It means a lot. Just say thank you guys.
Yep. Thanks, man.
Peace.